Hey, in this week's Retire in Texas, we're going to unpack Roth conversions, and we're actually going to go in the weeds a little bit. So make sure you tune into this episode, because with the expiration of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act at the end of 2025, we may see rates go up. So I want to prepare you and give you a window to do some Roth conversions and some of the things and the gotchas to look out for. So tune in this week where I interview Roger Stukkie. Have a great day. And remember, you think different when you think long-term.
Because we were able to allow them to take taxes out of the conversions at the parent's lower tax bracket, we saved over $240,000 in taxes on the amount of money that got to pass on.
It's absolutely brilliant. And I think good long-term planning does that. Constantly just engaging with the advisor to kind of strategize these things.
Do you want a wealthy retirement without worrying about money? Welcome to the Retire in Texas podcast, where you will discover how to enjoy your faith, your family, and your freedom in the state of Texas. And now, here's your host, financial advisor, author, and all-around good Texan, Darryl Lyons.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to Retire in Texas. This is Darryl Lyons, CEO and co-founder of Pax Financial Group. This information is general in nature only. It's not intended to provide specific investment, tax, or legal advice. Visit paxfinancialgroup.com for more information. So I'm going to have a guest today. Roger Stuckie's here. He's the shareholder of Pax. So he is certainly somebody that's going to be here for a long time, and then an advisor that just does an exceptional job. He's the only Kingdom advisor in our office. And what's cool is, Roger, this is your second time being here, right?
It is.
Yeah. So that's interesting because we have a lot of advisors and you're the one that says, I'll do it. So welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So I asked a lot of the advisors, I said, hey, who wants to talk Roth conversions on Retire in Texas? And I asked in a Zoom meeting, and it was kind of quiet. And then Roger said, I'll do it. I talk about that enough. I feel good. So I'm happy you came to talk about Roth conversions today. Please, you're listening. You're like, oh man, Roth conversions, that's not like entertaining to me. I know, but I'll try my best. And Roger will too. I'm going to have you tell us a joke to start out. I'm kidding. I'm putting you on the spot.
Which is funny. I brought one this time because last time I wasn't ready.
You did. All right, let's do it. Okay, give me a joke to start it.
Just a simple one I heard was guys talking to God.
Yeah.
And he says, God, how long is 1,000,000 years to you? And he says, about a second. And he goes, well, how much is $1,000,000 to you? And he says, it's about a penny. And he goes, well, if you don't mind, could I have a penny? God says, no problem. Give me a second.
That's a good financial one too, especially because Pax kind of integrates faith and finance. I think we're going to recycle that one.
Well, if you try to separate God and money, you're messing up right there. So
that's right. Yes, exactly. Over 2,000 scriptures, but let's jump into it. So I have 7 questions for the listeners here, but I don't know if we'll get to all of them that are in front of me. Before, let's lay the groundwork. There's Roth IRA, which IRA is not individual retirement account. A lot of people think that. It's individual retirement arrangement. But there's traditional IRAs, and then there's the Roth. Roth, another little factoid, was a senator from Delaware. His last name was Roth, about 1994, came up with this thing. So it hasn't been around in perpetuity. It's 30 years now or whatever. So Roth IRA is different from a traditional IRA in what ways?
Really comes down to taxes. A Roth IRA is funded with after-tax dollars, meaning there's no tax benefit today, whereas a traditional IRA is funded with pre-tax dollars, so you actually get a reduction in your taxable income today.
And then when you pull it out down the road?
And then it flip-flops. So Roth IRA will actually allow you to take all of the earnings out tax-free, assuming you're over 59.5, 5 years, some specifications. Yeah. And a traditional IRA, 100% of it is taxable as ordinary income.
And that's the problem that we're going to solve in this short time together, is a lot of people who have a bunch of money in traditional IRAs might have a ticking time bomb down the road, because if tax rates go up, the government's kind of twiddling their finger saying, I can't wait to tap into that because it's a revenue source. And I promise you, I've read enough of this, that the government is looking at all traditional IRAs out there and going, I cannot wait to get access to that money. They're licking their chops. And so we want to kind of strategize. We have to pay the Uncle Sam, but we don't have to leave a tip. So tell me a little bit more about those threats that might exist in the future for those that haven't deeply considered a Roth IRA.
I think the biggest threat is the difference between those two is the taxes. Short term, maybe you guys have heard of sunset. It's coming up in the end of 25 or the start of 2026. We revert back to some old tax laws, which simply means all of the brackets are increasing.
Not a little bit, a lot. I mean, they could
4 or 5% per bracket.
Yeah. I mean, that's real money.
So that's just in the short run. But then you look at things too, like The U.S. debt, I think as of yesterday, it was like 34.4 trillion.
It's crazy. Yeah.
That has to be taken care of in some format. And one of the greatest sources of income is taxes. So
yeah. They're salivating, man. They are salivating over traditional IRAs. So the traditional IRAs, the reason that this is interesting is because, yeah, you're like, okay, I pay taxes when I pull it out. I'll just not pull it out. But there's something called an RMD. Can you tell people what that is?
yeah, the required minimum distribution where they're salivating and waiting for your money.
Yeah.
You reach an age, which is different depending on what year you were born, but we'll say roughly 72 to 75.
Used to be easier.
Right. They've changed it 3 times in the last couple of years, but it is, okay, we've waited long enough. Now you have to take money out of your IRA, whether you needed it or not.
Yeah.
And as we said earlier, you know, when you pull money out of an IRA, that changes your taxable income.
So we talk sometimes about the ghost of Christmas future. And there's also in our future a need for good health care, and that's called Medicare. Medicare can be free, but sometimes it's not. You pay some Medicare surcharge premiums. So I'm kind of being slow with everyone here because I want you to put 2 financial thoughts together. You've got this Medicare potential premium down the road that you might have to pay. I'm asking the audience, how is that connected to this Roth IRA? And Roger, I'd like for you to kind of help bridge that gap in those 2 financial thoughts. Can you do that?
Yeah. So when you're looking at Medicare, the premiums that you pay are influenced by the taxable income that's coming in the door to you.
Well said.
And there's a 2-year lag on when those take effect, simply meaning whatever your 2024 income is right now will impact your 2026 premiums. And those brackets do not line up exactly with income tax brackets. So it creates 2 different dynamics that we have to pay attention to when we are creating more taxable income through the conversion process. It's a thing called IRMA.
Yeah, IRMA.
IRMAA. Fun education. It's income related monthly adjustment amount.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they reduced it to an acronym. But
it's a mouthful.
so you could be doing conversions to save taxes and then be unaware 2 years later, all of a sudden you're paying $100, $200, $300 more per month on your Medicare premiums.
So that's where I want to double click on for a second. I want to give people a big picture. Your future healthcare costs can be more than they should be if you haven't done some proper planning. That's what I'm trying to get at. So let's say in an ideal scenario, all of your income is from Roth IRAs, which is tax-free, no required minimum distributions. Then your tax return is really favorable and you don't have to pay Medicare premiums. You're like, oh, or very little maybe. And you're like, this is great, but that's not the reality of most people. And so most people have kind of a combination of buckets. And again, remember, like I said, the Roth IRA hasn't been around in perpetuity. So most people have big chunks of these traditional IRAs in the 401ks. You mentioned a word that we haven't got to yet, and that's conversion. So I want to set it up. You can, this is very important for everyone listening and very important to think about. Very important. I can't stress it enough. There is an opportunity now to convert from traditional IRAs to Roth IRAs. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I can. And I think just to put a pin on one more point of what we were saying, if we don't consider conversions and all of your money stays in an IRA or a pre-tax vehicle, when you get to that required minimum distribution age, whether you wanted the money or not, you have to take it. And sometimes the amount that's required to take out will influence your premiums on Medicare as well. So that's why the conversation is important, because even things we don't choose might influence what we have to do.
And you mentioned Medicare a couple times. I think that's just really good. I do want to let all the listeners know, for PAX clients only, we don't do this for everyone, but for PAX clients, we do Medicare planning. And so we're able to work with our Medicare expert and kind of navigate through that. So just to let some of their clients that are listening don't know that we do that and they go elsewhere, but we do that for our clients only. So now talk a little bit about conversions.
Yeah. So the conversion process is simply taking money from an IRA and moving it over into a Roth IRA. And the amount of money that you would move over, you would pay ordinary income taxes on in that conversion. But from there on out, all of that money that moved now begins to grow tax-free and is available for you to take out without taxes in the future.
That makes perfect sense. You said it very well. I made mistakes on converting Roths. I've been doing it for years. And I remember making a mistake once. I did something called a backdoor Roth. I didn't do it the right way. It was early in the conversion world too, to my defense. Everyone was just now starting to do these backdoor Roths, and there was still not a lot of, maybe there was a lot of rules, and I fumbled and client paid more in taxes, and they're still with me today. I'm sorry. It just happened. But you learn from those mistakes as financial advisors. Fortunately, there weren't a lot of zeros on it, so it wasn't like a huge material issue. But can you talk about maybe some of the mistakes that are made when people are changing from a traditional to a Roth, also known as converting from a traditional to a Roth?
Yeah. So, I mean, one, I can talk specifically to the backdoor Roth that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
A backdoor Roth is a tool we might use when your income is too high to be able to contribute directly into a Roth and or make tax deductible contributions to an IRA, which often will come inside because you have a retirement plan you're participating in at work or something.
Makes sense.
So you make a non-tax deductible contribution to an IRA, and then you immediately would turn around and you convert it into the Roth. You're like, if I'm not going to get tax benefits on my contribution, let me at least get it into a bucket where it grows tax-free as well. Where the mistake happens is that only works seamlessly if there are no other traditional or any IRA assets. And if there are IRA assets, the conversion ends up being prorated. And so you end up creating a tax liability that you weren't aware of.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
So lesson learned.
So that's the big one with the backdoor. If you're looking at just Roth conversions in general, some of the things are not paying attention to tax brackets.
That's huge, actually. Yeah. And that's where I think good planning works, is like you're looking at those tax brackets.
You know, if we're floating in the 22% bracket, 24 is not that much higher. That gives us a lot of room to play with. But if you miss something and you jump into a 32% bracket,
it's like, oh,
you know,
man,
we've just paid 8% more taxes and we didn't need to. So paying attention to those. We've talked about IRMA, which the bracket changes on when you start paying a surplus on Medicare premiums. If you're not paying attention to that, we might accidentally increase those.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good. That's a big mistake there too.
You might know in general, Roth IRAs have two rules in order to benefit from tax-free earnings. It's you have to have it for at least 5 years, and you have to be over the age of 59 and a half or older.
Yep.
What happens in a conversion is if you are under 59 and a half, a conversion gets its own 5-year timeline, whether or not you've had any other Roth set up. And a lot of times when we're doing conversions, we look at, can we pay the taxes outside of the account, or do we need to use money from the account? Well, a conversion, you just pay regular income taxes there. But if you pay the taxes out of that and you're under 59 and a half, you've ended up in a space where you've taken an early withdrawal, which comes with a 10% tax penalty. So depending on how much you're converting, that can equate to some serious dollars.
No, that's really good stuff. Now let's go nerdy for just a second. And for those that know me, the framework of this podcast is I try to keep things in a relatable format. And the only way to do that is to not use a lot of numbers. So that's why a lot of people tell me, Darryl, thank you so much for dumbing this down for me. And that's not my intent. I just don't want to use a lot of numbers because I just know it confuses, especially on air. But just hang with me for a second because I'm going to go to little numbers with Roger here. Can you give me an example? I asked him to bring an example and share that.
Yeah, which I was grateful because when you first told me, let's talk all this numbers without numbers, I was like, you know, asking a financial advisor to talk on a topic without numbers is like asking a pastor to preach without verses. I go, how do we do that?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So I did have just one example. The couple had $1 million in IRAs and they retired right around 65.
Okay.
The income bracket that they were in was 22%. So we had a lot of leeway to utilize the 24% bracket as well, knowingly that we were going to push into a couple of the Medicare brackets and we were going to increase premiums for a few years with the strategy. But there's two things why you might do conversions when you're considering it. One is the tax benefit to you, but the other could be the tax benefit to your future heirs.
That's a very important point. We won't be able to cover that today, but very important point.
In this case was beneficial to the latter.
Okay.
So they had built up enough fixed income sources where all of their assets were more of a surplus than a necessity. So when we started a conversion plan, we were able to convert $150,000 a year, which did put it in the 24% bracket. But the thought process was this money is for the future generation. So we withheld taxes out of the conversion and a way to allow them to pay the taxes ahead of time at a lower bracket.
That's really smart.
And so in 8 years, we had all $1 million plus the earnings converted. which happened to come right alongside of when their RMDs were starting.
Sweet. That's great. Yeah.
So now we no longer have forced distributions and the assets continue to grow. And as you push that out 10 years, take $1 million and just make math easy. We took out $240,000 for taxes and you had about 750 or 760 exactly, in case we're getting fact checked. And just double that over the next 10 years and we say we're at 1.5 million. Where both kids that were in line to get the money are in a 32% bracket because they're high earners. Had that passed to them as a traditional IRA at a 32% tax bracket, they would have paid $480,000 in taxes.
Oh my gosh.
Because we were able to allow them to take taxes out of the conversions at the parent's lower tax bracket, we saved over $240,000 in taxes on the amount of money that got to pass on.
It's absolutely brilliant. And I think good long-term planning does that. Constantly just engaging with the advisor to kind of strategize these things. And there's the quantitative side, which you laid out perfect. It was really well done. The quantitative side. And then there's the qualitative side where I know a PAX advisor, which kind of makes us unique, is we're going to talk about, hey, we're going to give these kids a lot of money. Do we want to make them waiters? What I mean by that is waiting for mom and dad to die and then just take all the money. We want to talk about, do they have the wherewithal? Do they have your same values so that they receive these proceeds, that they'll be good stewards of it? So that's very important. And I know that that dialogue takes place all the time. But also the quantitative side, making sure that we reduce that taxable income. And we talk a lot about, and I know you talk about this is a problem in the marketplace. The CPAs today will be focused on reducing taxable income today, maybe yesterday, last year, maybe the next year. But we've really taken on this responsibility of doing long-term tax planning.
Yeah. I mean, when we say we do tax strategies, the main goal is to reduce the amount of taxes that you pay long-term. And there's different ways to get that. Roth conversions are a big one. We can't really unpack the rest, but there's qualified charitable distributions, donor advised funds, things like that. One thing I do want to mention on the other side is a Roth conversion might not make sense for everybody.
Right.
It's still an individual basis. Like a 10-second plug on one case where it didn't is a couple had no beneficiaries. They had no kids. So no one of person money was going to. Charitable inclined, and over 50% of their money was geared to go to charities. Well, they didn't need assets along the way because of a good bill of fixed incomes. So to convert their money to Roth and pay taxes on something would have been a waste of money, because that money was going to a 501c who wouldn't have to pay taxes on the inheritance
that makes
anyways.
sense. Yeah.
So don't just automatically assume that's what's best for me. That's why we talk through things with every client, and everybody's unique. And
Yep. No, that's true. It's not a blanket prescription. So thank you. Hey, look, I know we went a little long-winded, but there was a lot of content to cover here. I try to keep it 15 minutes, but maximum 20. And so thanks for tuning in. Thank you. Anything else you want to add before we go?
Hey, you can get this under 15 if you can listen at a 1.5 speed.
That is true. I like myself at 1.5, actually.
That's how I listen to you.
That's how I listen to me too. All right. So thanks again. I appreciate you coming in here. Very prepared and great conversation in a short amount of time. So Roger Stukkie, thank you for being with us, and thank you for tuning in to the very end. I always appreciate you subscribing and liking, and then going to the PAX website if you haven't already to have a 15-minute consult with one of our advisors who have hearts of a teacher. I encourage you to do that. It's complimentary. And as always, I remind you, you think different when you think long-term. Have a great day.